Podcast GABL, brought to you by Tozix.
Welcome back. As always, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Don. And it is a pleasure to have you here joining us here today at GABL. We are launching into a very interesting subject. So I've got a question for you, Jonathan.
Okay, what is it?
The first question that I would ask is, what industry started in the late 1800s in the state of Michigan and today is a $37 billion a year industry?
Well, I happen to know the answer to that question, Don.
Is it Ford?
In fact,
Is it GM?
Oh, wait, I may not know the answer to this.
Automotive? What industry? Or is it cereal?
No, I was right. Yeah, it is cereal. It happens to be the title of today's episode. Okay.
Okay.
For a second, I thought you were throwing me a curveball.
It's amazing. I've been to Michigan just one time, but it is amazing to me
Cereal City?
Well, the fact that so many different industries kind of were birthed in this state of Michigan. I recognize that it was actually birthed in New York, but it really got its real start in Michigan. So why don't you...
Yeah, it doesn't seem fair, does it? Detroit is the backbone of the United States, but so many things happen in Michigan. Nobody even mentions it.
Yeah, it is true. And so, yeah, I thought we'd start off with a little trivia, but go ahead. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you found, and let's talk about it. I'm excited.
Okay, where does your research start? Because mine starts in 1941.
Okay, mine starts almost 100 years before that.
Oh my goodness. Let's start with you then. Let's follow a timeline.
All right, so September 1865 in a sanatorium in New York. In the sanatorium was called Our Home on the Hillside. A woman by the name of Ellen White, who actually would start the Seventh-day Adventist Church. She tasted something, and it was called granula. Granula was twice-baked wheat bread soaked overnight in water and then dried out, and it was actually the first cold cereal, from my understanding, the first cold cereal that would ever be served. And so she tasted this, and she said, we've got to do something about this. She was a big health advocate, and so she said, we've got to take this back, and we've got to begin giving this to all of our church members.
Right.
At that
because
point,
it followed with her belief system of vegetarianism or whatever they believed in.
Yes, and at that point, stomach issues was a huge issue for all of Americans. You think about breakfast at that point. I mean, it was just honey-cured ham, and it was a lot of carbs and biscuits and gravy and potatoes, which actually doesn't sound too bad right now. But
So, I messed up. I read you the wrong date. My research starts in 1856.
Oh, okay. Well, see, you start first.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay,
So,
why don't you start?
Before Miss Ellen, what's her name? Ellen White? And
Ellen White, yes.
Her husband, James, I believe. Okay, 1856, the Kellogg family. Woo! We're going to edit that one out. So 1856, the Kellogg family in their new home in Battle Creek. So they moved there from Massachusetts.
Okay.
John Preston Kellogg and his family members were all members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay, and
So-
this is Battle Creek, Michigan.
Yeah, Battle Creek, Michigan. The
Okay.
Kellogg's family, they were very devout Adventists, and they followed the Adventist diet, which was vegetarian, and I'm not exactly sure what the diet was. I just know they didn't eat meat.
Okay.
Do you know more about their diet, or?
No, I didn't do a whole ton of research on the diet, but tell me what you learned.
So John Harvey, he's always separated from his mom separates John Harvey from the rest of his brothers because he's a lot smarter than them. She's sort of his favorite.
Okay.
So she gives him lots of special attention, and he learns to play the piano, learns to play the organ. He's really involved in the church, And the church takes notice, and they start using him a lot because he's so talented.
Okay, just and I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but wasn't it not so much that he was smarter, but that his vision was better?
Well, yeah, I'll get to that.
Okay,
because
okay.
his youngest brother, Will, had problems, and we'll get to that. So by the time John was 11, he was working 10 hours a day in his father's broom factory.
Okay.
But because he was doing so well in the church, he mostly worked in the church and went to Adventist school.
Gotcha.
So Ellen and James, they taught against tobacco and caffeine, but I'll let you talk about that more.
Okay, so yes, they did not believe in anything. They actually wanted all natural products, and so they did not believe in caffeine. They felt like it was almost like a drug, and they were not interested in their parishioners eating or smoking anything related to either one of those.
Right. They said your body is a temple, you should take care of it. So 1875, John goes to Bellevue Medical College. Actually Ellen White pays for John to go. They kind of like take him under their wing because he's so involved in the church, and they send him to college.
Gotcha.
John, every day, every meal, he eats 2 apples and 7 crackers.
Is that because he was trying to stick to a diet, or
Yes,
is that because he was poor?
He didn't have much money, and he was trying to stick to the diet, and that's the only thing he knew was accepted by his religion.
Okay.
So he didn't want to eat meat, so he knew that apples and crackers were safe.
Oh, gotcha. All right.
So one day he was in the market. He was really excited to see this new oatmeal that was steam cooked. He thought, oh, steam cooked, it's probably going to cook faster, because at this time, the way oatmeal was made, it took hours, or at least an hour, to render to the point where you could eat it.
Okay.
So you had to boil it for an hour. It wasn't like oatmeal today.
Not like
we
this
got the nice
instant,
thin rolled oats.
microwave. Okay.
So he buys this oatmeal that's steam cooked, takes it home, but upon cooking it, he's cooking it for an hour and realizes it doesn't cook any faster than regular oatmeal. So he's disappointed, and he just sort of dreams about a time when breakfast won't be so hard to make. Because at this time, no matter what you decide to make for breakfast, it takes a lot of time and or effort.
Yes, and makes a mess.
So after Ellen and James pay for his medical school, he returns back to repay them by taking over their medical institution. So they also had like this quasi-medical institution where they would treat Seventh-day Adventist believers.
Okay. And that was in New York.
This was in New York, but they moved it to Massachusetts.
Got it. Okay.
At this time. So in 1876, John takes over the business, and he wants to take it in a different direction. When he gets back from college, he realizes that they're about to shut down because they're doing so poorly, only treating Adventists. So John was off in college, so he learned some things about business, and he said, what we need to do is open our doors to the public, service everybody, and base this more on science more than off the church, so we can have a broader appeal. Well, John and Ellen didn't like that at all, but they reluctantly agreed to let him take over because they realized they were going to shut down anyway.
Okay.
So they really had no choice.
So he is now opening up this sanatorium.
He's taken over the medical institution.
The medical institution. Okay,
Yes.
Go ahead.
So he finds himself overwhelmed with the duty of managing hundreds of employees, and he needs someone he can trust to help him, someone who he can control. So enter his youngest brother, Will.
Okay, so right before that, though, this is an interesting tie-in that right before he hires his brother, he is actually seen in this medical clinic, and he is pushing a wheelchair, and he's got a nurse along with him, and he's pushing this wheelchair with an individual sitting in the wheelchair. The individual was a 37-year-old young man. Mm-hmm. That young man was a man by the name of Charles Post.
Oh.
Charles Post had a nervous breakdown and had come because they had opened it up to even non-Seventh-day Adventist believers.
Right, yes.
He had come to this medical clinic to try to get himself back on the right footing. And what is about to happen is going to change history. So go ahead.
Yeah, so that part gets really good, but I'm going to back up a little bit because Will was a problem child. And so let me tell you a little bit about this guy. So Will's mother, his dad actually tried to discourage his mom from teaching him how to read because his dad thought it was going to be a waste of time. But Will's mother put him through school anyway. And Will struggled all the way throughout school. And he didn't know it at the time, but he was actually nearsighted, and that largely contributed to his struggle to learn in school.
There's the vision issue we were talking about earlier. Okay, so it wasn't so dumb, it was just he couldn't see.
Yes, and he was always known as the less intelligent, or he was always known as the brother of the intelligent and popular John Kellogg.
Got it.
So he's always playing second fiddle to his brother. So he moves away to start his own life outside of his brother's shadow, but Will doesn't last long on his own. He reluctantly moves back to Battle Creek and continues working for his father's broom factory. So a little more history on him, backing up a little bit. Back when he was 11, his father took him out of school and made him work in the broom factory. But he was actually a pretty good worker, and by the age of 12, he was supervising the other kids. By 14, he was going around selling brooms, and then when he was 16, he moved to Dallas, Texas. This is when he moved away to help another failing broom factory.
All by himself. He's not living with his parents at this point. He's on his own.
Yes.
Got it.
And it's not till he gets back to Michigan, way up in where we're talking about currently in the story, is 1879, when he visits an eye doctor, and he finally gets a pair of glasses. Now he goes to this business course and gets a degree in business. He meets his wife, and he marries a lady named Ella Davis.
Okay.
So now he has a business degree, and his older brother John decides to take advantage of his younger brother's new acquired skill, and he starts making his brother work for him 120 hours a week, but only pays him $13 an hour, which is less than what he was making at the broom factory. But Will has been so beaten down all of his life that he doesn't have the confidence to tell his brother, hey man, I'm going to go do something else. He just doesn't have it because everyone always belittled him all of his life, so he just accepted that his brother
he's basically started believing the words that they said about him, even though those words weren't true.
Yes.
Okay.
And he had a little bit of confidence when he got his glasses and he got a business degree. He thought, I can do this. But when his brother called him to ask him for help to come work for him, he did. He thought it would be fun to work for his brother. Think maybe things would be different now that they're older, but they weren't. His brother was still a bully and still had him under his thumb all day long, and to the point where he's working 120 hours, only paying him $13 a week.
That's crazy, and they are absolutely, I know from my research, these guys were oil and water.
Yeah, they are polar opposites for sure. So, 1884, Will, that's after they come up with the cereal. So, what do you have about Mr. Post?
Okay, so Mr. Post he's Charles Post. He's 37 years old. He had a textile business that had failed. That gave him the nervous breakdown. Mm-hmm. So he's here at this.
He goes to this health clinic to get his bearings straight.
Yes, and when he leaves, he had tasted this granula, whatever they were calling it at the time. It was this twice baked wheat bread that was soaked in water and then dried out and served to them in the mornings. And so he had tasted that, and he had also tasted this coffee that didn't have caffeine in it. Mm-hmm. And he thought, oh, that there's great things that could come of that.
Yeah, because he realized there was a lot of Adventists that didn't drink caffeine, and so he thought, wow, a coffee substitute with no caffeine, that could be a really big ticket item.
Yes. So he decides, he gets out of the sanatorium, and he decides that he's going to start his own business as well. He's going to have this clinic, but he realized that the food and the coffee really hadn't made him any better. But he attributed his getting better some months after he left this medical clinic to his positive thinking. But he was an entrepreneur.
One of those power of positive thinking guys.
There you go. But his entrepreneur spirit said, if I combine my power of thinking with this great diet, this is going to be a great seller for people to come in and invest in and make my own medical clinic of sorts.
Right.
So he launches that. He actually goes back to John Kellogg, Dr. John Kellogg, and he says, hey, let me sell your coffee. I'd love to market your coffee to others. But Dr. John Kellogg would not do it because he did not want to make a profit. He said he wanted to help others. And so Charles Post said, fine, I learned enough while I worked in your kitchen. This is not patented. I will go start my own. So he went and started his own. And within just a few years' time, he was making multiplied millions.
Wow.
While the Kellogg brothers weren't making anything because Dr. John Kellogg
Said we're not for profit.
We're not for
helping
profit.
People.
Yes,
That's very
go ahead.
Admirable. Well, 1894. So Dr. John Kellogg goes and meets with this guy named Henry Perkin. Henry Perkin makes this thing called shredded wheat. So it's boiled wheat. You got something to say before I say
No,
this?
no, no.
Okay.
I was right along with you. That boiled wheat.
He takes boiled wheat and then extrudes it into thin threads and then lets it dry, and it makes this shredded wheat.
Kind of like a pasta, almost like a pasta texture.
Yes, we're shredded wheat today is reminiscent of that.
Got it.
This is just the early stages of it.
I don't eat shredded wheat, so go ahead.
Yeah, neither do I. But I had to when I was a small child.
Oh, okay. All right.
Anyway,
Let's not bring up those bad memories.
So, Dr. John Kellogg tries to buy this shredded wheat from Henry Perkin because he says, man, this could be really good for my patients. It's vegetarian, it's consistent with what we believe, and it's healthy, it's going to help digestion. That was one of John's biggest thing, was helping people with digestion, because a lot of people had a problem with digestion because of their diet. Mm-hmm. So he found that if they ate the wheat and barley that was baked, and when it was baked, it was rendered down to dextrose, to sugar, so it was somewhat more digested than regular wheat.
Got it.
So it was easier to digest, and therefore people would have more regular visits to the restroom, and that was one of his big sellers. So he knew that this boiled wheat that was extruded into these small noodles, this shredded wheat, was going to help him, but Mr. Perkin wouldn't sell it to him. So John resolves to go back, and with the help of Will, they're going to make their own shredded wheat.
Gotcha. And by the way, so you brought up Will and his working 120 hours a week, making $13 a week. You didn't bring up some of the things that he did while he was, like, for instance.
Well, I'm about to talk about how he helped invent the first flaked.
Well, I was going to go to some of the things that his brother would make him do while he was working for this 120 hours, like
do
shine his
laundry.
shine his white shoes to perfection, run beside him and take notes while his brother rode a high-wheeled bike.
Yeah.
And I mean, this guy. Sometimes I wonder who was crazier, Will or John? John being the fact that he comes across as, in my research at least, as this egotistical, almost maniac. And then you have his brother who is so insecure. Like, who would run alongside your brother huffing and puffing, taking notes, and working 120 hours, administrating these hundreds of people? And I don't know. I just don't get...
no one knows for sure, but I suspect it was just because of he was so beaten down all of his life. He just didn't have the confidence to stand up for himself or believe in himself.
Kind of like a abused dog.
But there's no way of knowing for sure, of course. This is a long time ago.
This is true. Okay, moving on. Go ahead. Sorry, I sidetracked it.
Okay, so they're trying to replicate shredded wheat. So what they're doing is they're making dough, and then they're cutting it into little flakes, and they're baking it, but it's not turning out right. They've been at it for weeks. So one day they make some dough. They take the wheat and they make it into dough, and this is on a Friday. So the next day is Saturday, which is what they celebrate as the Sabbath day. So they don't work.
Okay.
So they let the dough sit out all day Saturday, and they come in Sunday super early. They would go running into the sanitarium. He called it a sanitarium. He
made up that word.
He invented that word. That's right.
Yes, that is interesting.
Fun fact. So they made the dough on Friday, weren't able to get any work done on Saturday because of Sabbath. So after rushing in on Sunday, they realized the dough smelled bad. But they're pretty frugal, and they're like, we've been trying for weeks. Let's just use it anyway. Why not? So they cut it into small little flakes, and they prepare it. They put it into the oven. They bake it, and it comes out perfectly crispy and golden brown.
Oh, wow.
So they taste it, and it tastes amazing. It's perfect.
Okay.
What they've been trying to do for weeks is turning out. So what they're trying to do is bake this, like I said earlier, to make it more easily digestible when you eat it, right?
Got it.
But it was too crunchy or too hard or too mushy. It would go bad, but this time was perfect. So they consult this baker, and the baker says, oh, yeah, well, you just cured it, let it rise a little bit, and the moisture distributed, and it worked better. And I said, okay, that's what we're going to do every time. This is awesome. So they finally figured it out, and they start mass producing it for all of their patients.
Wow.
And their patients love it.
And what year was this?
And it's helping them make more regular visits to the restroom. I know it's a funny phrase, but I'm trying to keep this family friendly.
Yes. Okay. And what year was that roughly?
1894.
Okay, 1894. So
That's when they started making more and more batches.
Okay, and when did they start the factory to start? Didn't they call this Granules at this time?
The Granos.
Granos.
Yes.
Okay.
So Post came to Battle Creek in 1891. Patient stayed for months.
So
That was 1891 when Post came.
okay.
So that gentleman you were talking about in the wheelchair, who believed in the power of positive thinking, who started that drink called Postum, which was an alternative to coffee without caffeine, and he made a lot of money. That was where we are in the story with Will and John.
Okay, so I got one of my dates mixed up. So when Post
opens his own medical boarding house with the mind cures and the self-help in 1892.
got it. Okay, so moving to 1895.
That's when the factory opens.
Okay, so the factory opens for Kellogg.
Yes, and they make Granos Flakes.
Okay, they're making Granos Flakes, but at the same time, Post is deciding at that point in 1895 that he's going to sell this Postum.
Yes.
Okay, now did you research any of how he got his start?
Yeah,
Okay.
I know in 1897 when he made his first cereal, I know exactly how it was made.
Okay, but before that, for the Postum, he actually was going to give up.
Oh,
because he
no,
didn't,
I don't know about this.
Okay,
Tell me.
so he didn't have the money like the Kellogg brothers,
Right.
And so he was trying to figure out a way to get the money to market Postum.
Did he sell his kidney?
And no, it was close though, because what he did was he got a piece of stationery, and he went to a financier, somebody, an investor, and he asked this gentleman, "Would you please invest in my Postum?" He gave him a drink of it. Here, try it. The guy tried it. He was not real thrilled with it, and he was basically going to say, "Hey, I don't have the time. Why don't you get out of here?" And when he looked down at the piece of stationery, he noticed 2 red dots on there. Mm-hmm. It appeared like blood. And so he looked down and he asked Charles Post, "What are those 2 dots?" And he said this, I quote, "It makes red blood." And the guy just looked at him and he's like, "It makes red blood, huh?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "My Postum will make your blood red." And he looked down and he said, "Yeah, I put 2 dots of my blood there to prove to you it will make your blood red."
Oh.
And the investor said, "You have my attention now, don't you?" And the guy said, "That was the whole purpose of why I put the 2 dots there. I wanted your attention."
Wow. He actually used that as one of his sales gimmicks. He would say it makes your blood redder.
Well, what ended up happening is that investor was so mesmerized by the fact that he would prick his finger and put 2 dots of blood there just to get his attention that he ended up giving him a major investment.
Wow.
So he could sell his Postum.
That's a weird and I guess smart move because it worked, but whatever.
Yeah, what a crazy marketing technique, though. So
he has that boarding house. So a couple years later, after he does the Postum, he's very successful with that. Now he has money. Mm-hmm. But he realizes the Kellogg brothers are making a lot of money, but they haven't tapped the public market yet. They're just selling to their own patients. And then once they have patients and the patients go home, the patients are allowed to order.
Via like a mail order or something like that.
Mail order, so they were selling to all their patients. And they were actually selling a lot. But
long before Amazon.
they weren't multi-millionaires like they could have been if they would sell them to the public. So Charles knows this. So he decides, well, I'm making all this money with my Postum, which is my ripoff of Dr. John Kellogg's caffeine alternative or caffeine-free alternative. So now I'm going to rip off their other cereal, their Granos.
Okay. And how did he do that?
He took a loaf of bread, baked it for 24 hours.
Oh, my.
Takes out this rock-hard piece of bread, cuts it into slices.
Okay.
It took him a while to saw it apart. And then he puts it through a coffee grinder. Mm-hmm. And once it's through a coffee grinder, he soaks it in milk and then eats it. And that is his cereal.
And what did he call that?
He called it grape nuts.
Okay, so it didn't have grapes in it. It didn't have nuts in it.
It didn't have grapes or nuts. But someone told him that if you bake barley wheat, Then you render it to dextrose sugar. And he thought, oh, dextrose sugar is the principal sugar in grapes. So that's where he got the word grape.
Okay.
It's a weird conclusion, I know. And then the nuts, literally someone who tasted it said, oh, it has like a nutty flavor to it. So he liked that. So he called it grape nuts.
And he was looking kind of for a healthy sound,
which is the weirdest way to name a cereal. That's so weird.
It is weird, but
I've seen grape nuts. Like my mom has mentioned them.
yes. Well, to me, I just look at it and I think this guy was a marketing genius. The whole stationery thing, the whole grape nut thing. He was out there, but he was not afraid to try something brand new, and it worked. So, okay, that was in 1898 when that happened.
1898 is when he starts advertising grape nuts. So
Okay.
he invents it in 1897. 1898 is when he actually starts selling it. And then he says, it repairs the brain, makes the blood redder, it prevents malaria. All these crazy claims.
Okay, so at the same time, what is going on with the Kellogg brothers?
Okay, so he's selling it for all these health benefits, right? But it doesn't become popular for that. It becomes popular because people find that it's cheap and very quick to prepare.
Okay.
So all the ladies are buying it because when they make breakfast for their families,
They don't have a big mess to clean up.
takes minutes,
they have to get
not
up
hours.
If they're making a regular breakfast, they have to get up hours before
Yes.
everybody else.
Now to answer
Okay.
your question, 1904 is when I get back to Will and John. So John, they get into a fight because Will, the younger brother, he wants to add sugar to the cornflakes and open it to the public. So he wants to make them taste better and open it to the public so that they can make money, because they see Post over here. He ripped off their cereal and he's making money. So why don't they do
Why
it
don't
too?
they make money off of
Yes.
something they invented?
But John's still saying, I'm not here to make money. I'm a doctor. He's very
Okay.
honorable, whatever.
Actually, can we back
No.
up just a second?
No. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we're out of time today. We're going to have to finish this episode later this week, so stay tuned for our next episode. If you liked what you heard today, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever you're listening on, whether it's Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, or Apple Podcasts. We appreciate you, and we appreciate every review. We'll talk to you in a few days.